Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're cracking open what I like to call an ancient survival manifesto, a document known as First Peter. Now, whether you're approaching this as history, literature, or theology, it is absolutely packed with these fascinating behavioral strategies and psychological frameworks. It's basically a manual for anyone trying to endure living in hostile times.
So let's just confront the core problem right out of the gate, okay? How do you actually survive in a world where you just don't belong? Because that was the fundamental dilemma for the original audience here. We're talking about a highly marginalized group of people scattered all across ancient regions like Pontus and Galatia. They're facing a society that's deeply hostile to them, and they need to know exactly how they're supposed to think, how to act, and how to just endure when the surrounding culture is entirely opposed to their way of life. To figure that out, we've distilled this really dense document into a clear 5-part roadmap. 1. Strangers in the world. 2. Building a spiritual house. 3. Navigating earthly authorities. 4. Finding purpose in suffering. And 5. Standing firm and vigilant. Let's dive right in.
Starting off with Section 1, Strangers in the World.
The text kicks things off with a massive identity shift. It literally calls the audience aliens and strangers. And no, obviously not the sci-fi kind. In this context, it's worn almost like a badge of honor. It establishes them as temporary residents on Earth who possess this living hope. They're explicitly told that they have an inheritance kept for them in heaven, one that can never perish, spoil, or fade. So the text is framing them as being shielded by a higher power for a permanent future, meaning all this current earthly displacement they're feeling, it's entirely temporary.
Now, if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by the struggles in your own life, you'll probably really appreciate how the author contextualizes their pain here. The text places their current, literal fiery trials into this massive cosmic timeline. I mean, think about it. Ancient prophets searched intently just to understand this salvation, then Christ suffered, and now these believers are just playing their part in a grand story that ultimately leads to future glory. It totally reframes their daily struggles as a crucial, expected part of a much larger divine narrative. The text even makes a point to say that angels actually long to look into these things. It's a huge shift in perspective.
Moving on to Section 2, Building a Spiritual House. So, with this brand new identity comes a pretty strict behavioral blueprint. The text pictures this isolated, scattered group of people being actively constructed into something incredibly durable. It calls them living stones. They aren't meant to just survive out there all alone. They're being built together upon a chosen cornerstone into a unified spiritual house and a holy priesthood. The goal here is to form a structured, holy community that offers up spiritual sacrifices. It's this really powerful, vivid image of unity for a group of people who are geographically separated and totally socially alienated.
But to get there, it requires essentially a massive system reboot. Embracing this new identity absolutely demands ditching past behaviors. The text is incredibly direct about it. Rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander. Just drop it all. Instead, they're told to crave pure spiritual milk like newborn babies, so they can actually grow up in their salvation. The overarching command here is to be holy in all you do, specifically because the God who called them is holy. This whole behavioral reset is designed to completely separate them from those ignorant desires they used to hold on to.
Okay, that brings us to Section 3, Navigating Earthly Authorities.
Now we're getting into what is arguably the most socially complex part of the text, how to actually interact with secular power structures. Impartially speaking, the text outlines a very strict code of submission. It instructs believers to submit, for the Lord's sake, to every human authority. That means from kings and governors at the top, all the way down to everyday household dynamics, where slaves are told to submit to masters, even the harsh ones, and wives are told to submit to their husbands. It also explicitly gives instructions to husbands, telling them to treat their wives with respect and consideration as co-heirs. So, you might be asking, why submit? Well, looking at it objectively, the text argues for this not to somehow endorse societal oppression, but as a highly specific, strategic tool for survival and influence. The overarching goal stated here is to live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. Radical goodness and structured submission are essentially framed as the ultimate methods for navigating a hostile culture. By doing good, they can silence ignorant talk and potentially win over non-believers without even needing to say a single word. Let's shift gears a bit for Section 4, Finding Purpose in Suffering. The reality is, this community was inevitably going to face unjust abuse, and Chapter 4 breaks down exactly why. The text explicitly contrasts two totally different lifestyles.
On one side, you have the past pagan life, debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, and carousing. On the other side, the new life in God, being clear-minded, self-controlled, loving each other deeply, and offering hospitality. Think about it. When someone you know decides to completely turn their life around for the better, sometimes their old friends are the very first ones to mock them, right? It was the exact same dynamic back then. The surrounding culture heaps abuse on them simply because they refuse to plunge back into that same old flood of dissipation. So to handle this intense pushback, the author commands a pretty radical psychological reframing of pain. Here's the paradigm they're given. Step 1. Expect it. Don't be surprised when painful trials hit as if something strange or unusual were happening to you. Step 2. Rejoice. Yeah, rejoice. The text actually tells them to view this as participating in Christ's own sufferings, a response directly modeled by Christ bearing sins on the tree without retaliating. And step 3. Endure. Those who suffer according to God's will are told to just commit themselves to their faithful Creator and simply keep doing good.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, standing firm and vigilant.
You know, surviving that level of external hostility requires a massive internal defense mechanism. You need extreme cohesion and really strong, selfless leadership. So the text mandates that elders must shepherd the flock willingly, serving as actual examples, not lording their power over people or doing it just for money. Young men are told to submit to the older members, and crucially, all members are told to clothe themselves with humility toward one another because, as the text bluntly states, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Listen to the dramatic imagery in this quote. Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. This is a dire warning. They aren't just fighting regular societal norms here. The author really wants them to understand that they are resisting a very real spiritual enemy. This reality requires them to stand incredibly firm in their faith, staying totally vigilant and awake to the unseen threats all around them.
But, and this is crucial, the guide doesn't just end on a note of fear. It actually wraps up with an absolute assurance. After they have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will personally restore, strengthen, and establish them. It's a really powerful bookend to the letter. It fully acknowledges the harsh reality of their immediate suffering while simultaneously guaranteeing eventual permanent restoration and steadfastness.
Which brings us to our final, pretty provocative thought to leave you with today. If enduring unjust trials is the ultimate test of character, how does your response to adversity define who you really are? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer of 1 Peter. I highly encourage you to ponder how these ancient strategies for facing a hostile world might actually apply to your own modern adversity. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.